You've done a class and I've done a class, so I don't know that we need to introduce ourselves.
Well, I'm Otis Bass.
And I'm Joe Diener. We're both in South Tampa. We are the dynamic duo.
Yeah. So, and today, this last class is going to be talking about servicing the buyer, but this can also be used as servicing the seller, because we're really talking about the process of once you have a contract signed, what do you do? What are the best practices from cradle to from the beginning to the end?
Right.
And so, so Joe, go ahead and take it on, and I'll just color commentate because you've really put together a great thing here. Yeah.
So, you know, what we do is put something together, and, you know, why do buyers need you? And this, by the way, goes in the same thing of sellers, by the way, if you're doing an expired listing, right? Why do they need you? Okay, because they lack the experience of completing a transaction. You know, there are, you know, for sale by owners, guess what? Very few of them go to completion. And very few where buyers are trying to buy a for sale by owner actually go to what they consider consummation now, which is the final close. So, you know, they need you. They need your experience. If this were easy, you'd be able to do this online, right, Otis? I mean,
I totally agree.
You wouldn't need an agent. So there's monumentous steps and challenges in the process. How many questions do we get on their day? I mean, we don't get the easy questions. It's, we found a lien against the property. You know, the seller died 2 days before closing. What do we do? You know, if it were easy, anybody could do this. So they need you. When it's easy, there are no bumps in the road, right? I don't know that I've had a buyer have a transaction that there were no bumps in the road for the last 5 years. Everyone really has some issue on it. I'm sorry, it doesn't. I used to, you know, before the first collapse, I could close 3, 4, 5 deals in a week, and you know, it just closed. There were no issues, but I couldn't do that today with the amount of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So as the agent, we are the expert in the buying process. They're relying on you. What do they know about real estate? What I heard in the lunchroom, my neighbor just bought a house.
Yeah.
How else do they learn, Otis?
So, you know, there's a lot of information out there, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. And that's where it can be dangerous, because the misinformation is more dangerous than not knowing. And so one of the things that Joe and I have done is we've collected best practices from some of the top agents from across the board, from our travels, his travels, my travels. And we put that together to really create an experience that expectations are given properly. And then we walk them through the process, because when you think about the buyer process, especially if it's their first home or their second home, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of tension, because it's a big thing for them. And so the process with expectations and a framework, and then what's really important, in my opinion, is a very good last impression, because a very good last impression always leads to more business, good referrals, and overall, the story is a much better story to tell. You know, when you have a story, when you have a good ending, right? Especially in real estate.
And ultimately, if they go to sell the house, if they had a good experience, what? They're going to call you. So, you know, why do they need to set the expectations at the beginning of the buying process and for all along the way? If we don't set the expectation, Otis, guess who gets to set that? The buyer. Right? Here's a story. Sunday, I met with a client. They're selling and they're buying. They're a VA deal. And I'm like, well, do you have, you know, what do you have money-wise for down payment for, you know, because you want new construction. So the requirements for new construction is 1%, 2%. It depends on the builder. It could be as much as 5%. He goes, I'm VA. The last time I bought a house, I only put $1,000 down. Well, that was his expectation. that this next house, I only need $1,000 to buy a house, but that's not reality of today. All right. So, you know, and then I had to sit and explain the process and whatnot. So, and by the way, when I came home, I wrote it down and sent it to him back through written communication. When we have a couple and we're sitting with a couple, one person is maybe a D, like you and I, a D and I, like give me the Reader's Digest version. And then the other one is a C. I want the I's dotted and the T's crossed. So we all don't communicate the same way. We all remember the same way. So even though you do something verbally, you should always follow up communication wise in writing. So do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So part of what I've seen and what I even do when I set the expectations, now we put on our project manager hat. The contract is executed. And so we want a timeline of events, important dates of the contract. So the first date obviously is, when is the escrow due? And we should also know that the escrow, if you write the contract on a Thursday and you have 3 days to get escrow in, but it ends on a weekend, so that's due on Monday at 5 p.m. If Monday's a holiday, then it's due on Tuesday at 5 p.m. You're at the contract on a Monday, you know you got to get it in that business week by Thursday, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when does the expiration of the inspection period take place? And then how long is the financing contingency? So you need those dates on the contract, because, or you need the dates of the contract in front of you, and having that put into an email to not only the buyer, but the title company, the loan originator. Now everyone's on the same page and they have a reference to which they can go back to, and they can remember these particular timelines.
Right.
I think it's important that the title company and the lender are also included in all the timelines. So that way we're all working towards the same goal, on the same team and on the same side. And then from there, when we talk about expectations and we talk about the inspection, we got to really frame the expectations of the inspection. This is so you know what you're getting yourself into, not so you can come in and cancel the contract if you get scared. Things are going to come up. We want to know, what are you getting yourself into? And then from there, we can assess what is going to be, either A, has to be massaged a little bit or negotiated a little bit, or just in general, if it's a standard contract, now we have to get some repair guys out there, some licensed contractors, whatever the case may be, to get a bid on those repairs. But the key is, it's to expect something and then to handle it, not to freak out. Let's see what we're getting ourselves into, and we'll handle it from there.
Right. So when we go under contract, right in dot loop, there is the critical dates sheet, which we can fill out, and it's really good. I put those in my phone to remember, because I have 5 or 6 deals going on at one time. I can't keep all of them in my head anymore, so I have to put them on my phone, and they're in there to remind me the day before and the day of. God, if I ever lost my cell phone, I'd be really in trouble. All right, so everything goes in there. Some people use the critical date timeline. I compose a letter which has the critical dates in it, which goes over the escrow monies that they have to make loan application, and it's the dates are there, but it's also explains why we're doing what we're doing. Right. And I send that out to them, and when I send this letter, basically I call it the congratulations letter when they go under contract. I also CC the loan officer along with a copy of the contract goes in with it, the executed contract. So everybody is working on the same dates. And it's in clear English, so no one can say, oh, I didn't realize I had to do it in 10 days. I thought I had a month to do it. So everything is communicated. And then that way I can go over them. Hey, you got the email that I sent you. Let's chat about it for a minute. So it's kind of all down there. The protocols of inspection, who's handling it? What is it? What's going to happen with the appraisal? That's going to happen right after inspections, right? So we're going to order the appraisal. What's the title company's role in this process? They're going to be contacting you. You're going to be sending your escrow to them. And by the way, we're going to need to order a survey if the seller doesn't have it. So communicating, and why are we talking about this? Because when we when we ask for the survey at the end, right? Guess what? They're asking a question. Did your agent communicate with you? Right? So we know the answer to the test. So we're kind of loading it, right? So we're making sure they understand everything in the process.
And Joe, if you could I want to just add on to that.
Sure.
You piggybacking on what you're saying with communicating, that's really the key to it all. And so when handling the inspection, I find some best practices are to have 3 inspectors that you give them, let them shop. I've also seen situations where once the buyer has purchased a home and it turns out they tore down some sheetrock and it turns out there was some termite damage there, the inspector missed it. And the inspector wanted to pin the agent, saying the agent knew about, they were in cahoots. And the agent quickly said, listen, I gave you 3 for you to shop. I don't, we're not going out having beers. There's no kickbacks, nothing like that. These inspectors have done a good job for me in the past. And let's see how now they make it right. And the inspection company actually made it right. They did a really good job with that. But the key for that was having the options there. So that way it doesn't look like you're in cahoots with one company. You're giving them options to shop. And that's part of commitment as well, time and money. They're the buyer. Ultimately, you're the one that's providing them with information. Let them decide who they're going to go with. Let them, and then from there you run with it because you've already worked with that inspector. So I just wanted to mention that, having the options of inspectors, I think that's very important.
Yeah. I mean, I do, I try to get them in the very beginning to start the process, understanding that this is their home and they're buying it. So the first thing they're doing is, here's the title company information. They're going to be calling you and sending you wiring instructions, give them a call, talk to them, so I want them to start, this is a process. It's like walking. We're taking one step at a time. And the first step, this is the first step you're doing, wiring your escrow money. The second step is going to be making your loan application. So I'm walking them through the process. Why? Because agents we're control freaks. Okay. So, you're stepping up and you're being in control. And that's why we outline it. And that's why I like to get their skin in the game right away. You're going to be making, these calls. Now, after you make loaning, and now we got to set, as you said, inspections. Here are the people that do inspections. Is there one that you want, or do you want to call them? How do you want to handle it? So.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And, let's touch on the title company one more time.
Sure.
Title company, you can expect them to send out the wire instructions for the escrow, however they're going to do that. But then there's going to be an agent worksheet that you have to fill out as well. Make sure that you fill it out properly. Don't just discount it. Now you get the deal and you want to move on to the next thing, because that's going to be dealing with your money. That's going to be dealing with your commissions. Make sure your commissions are on there correctly.
Yes.
Make sure that the seller or the buyer understands how important it is for their personal information to be correct, because that's how it's going to be recorded on a deed. And so let's make sure that your social, everything that they need to make sure this is a clean transaction, you give that to them, right? Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Seller. And so that way it's just one less thing that you have to worry about as the time passes and you start going through a couple of speed bumps along the way.
Right, exactly. So after inspections, and by the way, we passed. There wasn't too many things that we needed to do. We did a inspection contingency release. The seller agreed to fix everything. Now we need to communicate with the buyer. This is our next steps. What are our next steps? And I call it countdown to closing. It kind of sets the mood. Okay, we got past the halfway mark here. Now it's time to get going, and it kind of is a way to build excitement to them. Like, okay, we got past the inspection. That's a big hurdle. You made your loan application. Now you got to start looking for insurance. That's your next job, okay? And it's important, so you got to do it. Then, then we're going to hook them up to get their utilities turned on. And then a discussion of moving day. And there's a reason for that, right? So some of this is, because you and Otis, you and I have, had people where they pull up with their truck ready to unload and we haven't even gone to closing yet, right? And okay, so we have a discussion, and the discussion for funds for closing, meaning, are they all in a place that you can get to them and wire them? Because, some people don't realize not every bank can wire the same day. All right. Or some banks wire only once a day at 4 o'clock. All right. So if you got a closing at 10 o'clock, you're not getting keys till you get funded. Right. So, Otis, you're muted. Oh, I lost you. There you go. Okay. All right. So we have that discussion. So a week before closing, this is when it starts getting really, down to the wire. So again, I put together another little letter that I sent. I'm really good because guess what? The transaction process is the same from transaction to transaction, right? There's the same steps. So try to facilitate that. So guess, week before closing, what are we doing, Otis?
That's where you start scheduling it. And guess what? That's when the anxiety is at its highest. And so you really want to get in front of the buyers and really create the checkpoints. So that way, again, it goes back to expectations. You want to give them checkpoints and a roadmap to follow. So that way they're not getting super anxious because they don't know what's going on. That's the worst of the evils, correct? And
right.
So what you have here, setting up the final walkthrough and closing. If there were any repairs or anything like that had to be done, make sure you reach out to the buyer's agent, have that conversation with them. So that way we're not putting the cart before the horse and we're doing our walkthrough before the repairs were done. And then we're all upset. If the repairs weren't done a week before closing, well, that's a red flag and we need to start addressing that with the other side.
I always ask for receipts 3 days prior to closing for anything that's been done. That way, that's a trigger for me to make sure that I'm talking to the listing agent. Hey, can you send over those receipts? Yeah. And I put that right on the inspection contingency release that they will forward those 3 days prior to closing. So
those are great best practices, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, it's already taken care of. And if it's not taken care of, it comes to light a week before closing, not at closing.
Right. Or it's like, oh, we didn't get this done. Well, now you have 3 days to get it done. Yeah. So, and here's the theory I have, and this is me. The day of closing, I want to sit at the table and sit there and look pretty. All right. I don't want to work. Right. I don't want to be calling the listing agent going, we walked through and these 2 things weren't fixed and the house is dirty and where are the keys in the garage door opener? So 3 days before closing, I'm communicating with that listing agent. Where are the garage door openers? Where are the keys? Are they at the house or are they at the title company? Has all the repairs. Can you send me over those receipts? Make sure your buyer understands that the house has to be clean, not just empty. So,
yes, broom swept, please. We're not asking for much. Broom swept, that'd be great.
And it's not uncommon, all right? If you have, and I do this especially when I have people that are moving from out of town, that they're not here, I always, in the contract, ask for the house to be professionally clean at the time of the seller's leaving. Because the last thing you want your buyers to do is to pull in from Camp Lejeune at 10 o'clock at night and walk into a house that really is not that clean. You don't really want to do that. So it's just one of those things I'll add in there. It's $100 to the seller, and the 9 times out of 10, the seller is going to have it clean, but it just our contract doesn't really cover it in very much detail of what the condition of the house is, other than empty and no personal items left. Right. It doesn't really. Yeah.
And so, and another best practice we want to talk about when we talked with the title company, the listing agent and the lender, Get an idea of where the title company numbers are a week beforehand. Make sure that your commission is correct.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you think about all the work that you've done on the file, to ignore the numbers at the very end is just poor business practice. I've seen some agents get burned at the very end where they were so happy that the deal was finally coming to a close and never reviewed the numbers. And then afterwards they get shorted on their money, and someone in title messed up on their file. And they messed up on the commissions, and it wasn't right. And they didn't take the time to make sure that their commissions and the commissions on the other side and the numbers for their buyers were all accurate. And the best practice that I found, you do that a week ahead of time, and you knock out the little things before the buyer and the seller ever get a chance to see it. So that way they're not seeing something, and now you have different expectations if it has to be corrected, right? The seller might think they're making more money. Oh, but they didn't calculate the commission right. Now you've just hurt the expectations.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When you're communicating with that title company a week before, I'm asking them, did you get the addendum for the $1,000 credit for the buyers?
Right.
Do you have my commission down at 2.5 or 3% or whatever the heck it may be? I sent over the order for the home warranty. Did you receive that? Is it, and the seller is paying for that. So you're right, Otis, that's really the time to do that ahead of time, because you don't want to be, what happens is sometimes they don't send you the title company doesn't send you a prelim. They send you, okay, this is the final deal that we've already talked with the lender, and it's 2 hours before closing.
Yeah, so mayhem.
So
if, a lot of mistakes.
If you change anything on that, all of a sudden now it's got to go back through underwriting and might cause a delay. So Otis, you're 100% right. Get that done ahead of time, and put that on your calendar. And because you should be doing all that when you're setting up a week ahead of time the closing. The closing time. Everyone needs to have a schedule. You can't the day before decide that closing is 11 o'clock on Thursday.
Right.
You just can't.
And so some best practices for this can also, again, it transcends for both buyers and sellers. I've found that with sellers, you do a pre-closing, and that way you have the originals back to the title company so they can fund. And then from there, because what will happen is, let's say they do a remote closing, which is very common in this pandemic-driven world that we're currently in. And so we send a mobile notary out to their house with the mask and the gloves and everything. And they get it notarized on the day of closing. And then they put it in a FedEx, and then they overnight it. And so then the next, the buyer who's in a great big hurry to get into the house, they now have the wire done. They have the numbers right with the lender. The lender says, yeah, we can fund. But the title company says, but we don't have the originals. And so now your seller has to wait an extra day to get their money. And in many cases, the buyer has to wait an extra day to get the keys. And so one best practice, have the seller pre-sign. That way, that's taken care of, and explain to them that the numbers will probably change depending on what's going to happen with the lender and the title company at the very end. But if you've already contacted the title company and you've said, all right, here's my numbers, let's make sure that my commissions are right. Here's what I see the other side being. Here's in the part of the contract, we got a seller credit for X amount, make sure that's accounted for. And then also, last but not least, there was also a credit or whatever the case may be that you should know about, right? And then as they've already got those numbers plugged in, now when they're dealing with the lender, it's just them and the lender numbers. They don't have to worry about, oh, well, the commissions aren't right either. And then this credit is goofy as well. Do you know how much havoc and chaos that creates?
It's crazy.
And it leaves a really bad last impression. It really does. Because if the buyer thinks they're bringing in X and it's very favorable, but then they didn't get this correct on the deed, and now they're bringing in more than they thought they were going to bring in, well, that's what their last impression was. Let's say the seller thought they were going to make more money because they got a chance to take a look at the numbers, but your commissions aren't right. Now, what's the last impression? Yeah, I was going to make this, but, I had to pay them this.
Yeah.
Versus just saying, hey, here's what it is. Oh, good, I'm happy with it.
When I'm working with a buyer, once we go under contract, the listing sheet that I went to the house with them with the codes on and everything else, that gets stapled in my file, not to remember the codes when I go back to do the home inspection, but because the commissions are stated on that, and the MLS sheet is dated the date it was printed. So in case you have a listing agent who decides to go in and finagle the commissions after the fact, you have a printed sheet the day that you showed the property, which was the offer of commissions to you when you showed that property. So I always keep a copy of that in my file to make sure. I've never had an issue, Otis, but the day I don't keep that sheet, I'm going to have it. I'm going to have an issue, right?
Best practices. Stay within the framework of best practices.
Yeah. So we're setting up the final walkthrough and closing. We're communicating with the title listing agent, the lender. Now we got everything, there organized. I order my home warranty. If there's a home warranty on the property, to make sure that gets to the title company, the invoice gets there. Remember, if you ask for a home warranty, it's usually the buyer agent who's ordering that, and communicating with the buyer about the closing process. So again, we're setting expectations, because in absence of us setting them, the buyer is going to set them. So I always discuss, Otis, and I don't know about you, I always discuss the final in my final closing letter, what they can expect from their lender about the closing disclosure. I can't tell you how many times the lender doesn't really explain to them that I'm going to send you this closing disclosure and you need to sign it right away so that we can close in 3 days.
Yes.
I always make sure, because I want to close on the day that we're supposed to close, I always make sure they understand the importance that they're going to get that closing disclosure 3 days or before they're closing, and don't worry about the numbers on it, because they're not going to be totally accurate.
Right.
But what is that disclosure? I explained to them, it's really the acknowledgement from the bank of what they're charging you, and it has to be signed. And I discuss the funding and possession, and I do that because, short story, I had a guy who was in Korea who never saw the house. I videotaped it, and he had his moving truck pull up the day of closing before we were closed, and he's thinking that, oh, while we're at closing, they can start moving this stuff in. And I'm like, no. So, over the years, you think people know what is expected, but over the years, you have these issues and you go, okay, we really do need to explain what funding is. That's like you've given your credit card and they swiped it. So.
And also, it's important to understand that some banks are faster with wires than others. And so you may send your wire at a certain time, but it might not be received until the next day, depending on the bank. So it's good to get in front of that as well. Get an idea from the title company how much the wire will be for the remaining deposit. And then also guide them, but don't be involved with the actual process, because there's so much wire fraud. Make sure that, a good best practice for every realtor is just to give a simple reminder. Please make sure you call the bank, or your bank calls the title company, you verify the numbers, and you know where it's going. And now you're putting the onus on the bank. You're putting the onus on the title company to make sure they are right when you send your money.
Yeah, and in my email, it says, confirm with the bank the numbers before you send. So I'm covering my butt too.
And by not doing that as a realtor, I almost feel in today's world it's slightly a derelict of duty. And what I mean by that is how many, over the last few years, Joe, how many text messages are sent out to unsuspecting buyers saying, hey, we changed escrow companies, wire your money to this account now. And they don't know any better because no one actually had the conversation with them up front. And that's a very tough situation. I was a part where I was a managing broker, and an agent, her client was intercepted and sent money through SunTrust. It was about 40 grand. And they found that money in a bank. It was luckily in a SunTrust bank. in Mexico. And so they were able to receive the money back. But let me tell you, that was a very strange closing, because when they asked her, hey, when you sending the wire? And she goes, I already sent the wire. But no one talked to each other. There was no bridge of communication. And we as realtors, we're the ones that kind of quarterback that situation at that point. We're the ones that are kind of like just delegating, because the title company, they're doing their job. And at the very end, they just have a process themselves. And some are better than others. Let's just say that's what it is. And so letting your buyer know, listen, there's a lot of wire fraud, and you may even be approached via text message, email, whatever the case may be. But why don't we take it one step farther? And before you send any wire, let's have that conversation. And we want to make sure our bank is talking to the title company. We'll go with that one extra moment of making sure the preventative maintenance is there versus having to try to find your money in Russia or Mexico or wherever bank is offshore.
Or whatever. Yeah. I mean, there's just, if people can find a way to finagle the bagel, they're going to do it. All right. And, you know, they stop receiving checks at title company because it got too good to duplicate checks, you know, on copiers, and they moved to wiring, and then people figure out a way to scam through the wiring process. So the buyer and the sellers are expecting us to walk them through the process, and we are the expert, and there's no way, shape, or form that we're not. If you're standing in front of the judge, you're a realtor, and how many transactions have you had? And this process is the same, basically the same for all your transactions. So why wouldn't you discuss, you know, fraud with your buyer when you're asking him to wire money? So there's just no way you're going to get out of that. Now, Mike, come on, screen, move to the next screen. It doesn't like me.
Well, while you're doing that, the other thing, and I know you have it in your framework of best practices, is knowing who the electric company, utility company, all that. Go ahead and get that information over to the buyer, so that way they can start the process of just making sure on that particular date that they're closing, that they have power when they move in. And I find also, we live in a world of convenience, right? The Amazon world. I mean, if you want something, you can order it on your phone. It's there that day, the next day, whatever the case may be. If it's a scenario where they're moving in from out of state, and you know that the landscaping company of the home they're buying, you can get the information for them. Maybe you can help them with just keeping it going for an extra month. If it's a pool company, keeping it going for an extra month, or at least giving them the information of who it is. So that way they can buy that convenience and not have to jump in there and start servicing their own pool and landscaping. And sometimes that helps. Again, all you're doing is creating a really good last impression by giving them options with that.
Yeah, for some reason, I am trying to move my screen forward, and my computer is not cooperating. So hold on. There we go. All right, it finally did it. So, discussion about moving day, all right? Not the day of closing. Okay.
Bring that up a week ahead of time, please.
Yes, I discussed this early on, but I also reiterate it, all right? And things happen, Otis, right? You get a call in the morning, we haven't gotten the package yet. We're waiting on the lender. We're waiting on the lender's final numbers. They haven't given it to us yet. Crap happens, and it's not our fault. So we need to make sure that we have that discussion. IDs. Most banks only require one, but every now and then I get to a closing and they expect the buyer to have 2 IDs. All right, and you've been in lending, right? So you understand this. So I just tell them to bring 2 IDs, and if you only need one, that's fine. But guess what? If you get to closing and your driver's license has expired and you forgot to renew it, they can't use that ID. Right. So it's always good to have a second ID, and ask the title company ahead of time, what they'll accept for an ID. One time I had a title company use the homeowner's policy as ID. I don't know how she got away with that one, but that's fine, right?
Yeah. And then also, all right, where is closing going to take place? Is it going to be, at the title company, or is it going to be remote? I find over the last 18 months, I would say 80% of them are remote. From what I've seen, I could be off. Maybe it's 70%. But most people like the remote closing because of the convenience, the mask, the protection that it offers, things of that nature. I know my personal closings that I've had, they've almost all been remote. And we want to vet. I've even gone as far with some clients to make sure that I talk to the mobile notary, ask them if they can wear a mask, ask them, just say, hey, they're COVID sensitive. And so if you could be so kind to wear a mask while you're there. And,
Right.
and so that way, again, you're laying out the field, that you're giving the roadmap to everyone. Humans are always a variable and everything, but at the same time, if everyone's got a roadmap, it's kind of easy to follow the playbook, if you will.
Right.
And find out for your people, talk to the lender, find out what kind of funding they do. Is it where they can fund right away? Or is it going to be where that all this stuff has to be sent to the lender and then the lender sends the money? Because some lenders will send the money ahead of time and it sits in the title company coffers.
Right.
And then when the closing is done, they send over the finished documents to the lender, and the lender gives them a funding number. And then they can release the money and start paying off the seller mortgage if there's one, start paying out everyone. And that's when the transaction actually takes place at funding, right? All the paperwork is done. Now we're processing it and the transaction takes place. If the title company and the lender happen to not be really communicating very well, be the bridge of that communication, because if they're not communicating and then it gets sideways, you're the face of the deal. Not the lady in the closing room of that lender, not the title company who really hasn't paid much attention to your buyer for the last few weeks until the very end, right? They're not the face of the deal. You're the face of the deal. So controlling that, getting in front of that really, not only is that really a professional way of handling your business, but it also keeps in mind any red flags that pop up, you're on top of it. Because if you didn't know about it, they're going to look at you like, how did you not know about this? You're representing me. How did you not know about this? That's a terrible last impression. You may have done everything right to the very end. And then at the very end, someone else messed up, but you're the face of the deal. And now you're not getting what you're looking for with the referral, possibly more business, but more importantly, and most importantly, a successful sale that you can tell a good, nice little story with a happy ending. It turned into a nice little story, and then some bozo screwed up something in the numbers. You had no idea, and then it blindsided you and them. And so now you're backpedaling, trying to save yourself and save face. But if you know about that ahead of time, and you communicate and you bridge those gaps of communication, things will be so much smoother. And if there is a red flag, you have time to pull it out, and you have time to correct it before it actually comes to the closing table.
We can't bring up the word communication more than we're doing, right?
Yeah.
But the things to kind of remember is the lender, find out where their processing is, what state, what time zone. All right, because if they're on the West Coast, you might not want to be planning a closing at 9 o'clock in the morning. Right. All right, so you just kind of have to figure that out, and always communicate with the lender. Closing is at 10 o'clock. Walkthrough is going to be at 9. Our closing is at 10. We should be expecting funding around 10 a.m. All right, or 10:30 or whatever. So set those expectations up. It's easy for you and I to say because we've been through this hundreds of times, right? But you're trying to play chess. You're trying to look 2 moves down the board of what can cause a problem, all right, or an issue. And of course, setting up the time of the final walkthrough, you're also doing at that time. You need to communicate with the listing agent. By the way, we want to do walkthrough at 9 o'clock in the morning on the day of closing, or we want to do it the night before the day of closing. We want to make sure that the seller is out. You don't want to do a walkthrough if they're not out. That's meaningless, because the whole idea of the walkthrough is to make sure there's no damage, right, to stuff. So yeah.
And any repaired items that need to be fixed in the inspection period that haven't quite been there, you had the conversation with the buyer's agent, but you haven't walked through it yet, so it needs to be done. And so, Joe, let's talk about the walkthrough best practices, because
Yes.
oftentimes we will do a walkthrough and it's not what the buyer expected. And so what do we do at that point? I've been in situations where they took the refrigerator and they left a garage sale refrigerator, right? You can't do that. Like the contract stipulates that the home has to be maintained at the time of contract as the same at the time of closing. So there's no refrigerator swapping. You can't do things of that nature. And then, a big thing that is often overlooked is the expectations of TV wall mounts and TVs that are on the wall. If you don't have that conversation ahead of time on what's going to happen, generally I always make sure that's negotiated in the contract. But if you missed it, let's go ahead and set those expectations, because if the buyer is expecting the TV to be there and the seller's expecting to take the TV home, guess what's going to happen at the walkthrough? You got a bad last impression, man. You got issues.
Well, technically,
they wanted that TV there, and now they're upset that you didn't look out for their best interests, right?
Yeah, technically the TV belongs to the seller, but the mounts belong to the buyer, right?
That's correct. And you know what's interesting about that? I'm waiting for the new contract to see if it evolved to encompass the TV wall mount and the TV.
Yeah, they've got a new one out. I haven't seen the red line yet, so.
Yeah, well, I tell you, between that and washer and dryer, you don't have that conversation, you're in big trouble at the end.
Yeah.
So then there's this. You go through and there's something wrong at time of closing. How do you handle that? Right? You have to have an addendum. You have to recognize it in writing, and the seller has to agree to clear it or they're in breach of contract. And then there's some cases where, we've done legal roundtables on this. They're just a hairy situation where you have to step out as a realtor because you cannot practice law.
Right.
And it will become a law issue where they may have to lawyer up, and that becomes post-closing. And once it's post-closing, you're no longer a part of that. And you have to let them know, look, this is unfortunate, but at the end of the day, you got to hold their feet to the fire as best you can without becoming in breach of contract yourself.
I try the best of my ability. If I'm closing on a house, like I'm closing on one, tomorrow. So yesterday I took a ride. It's only about 20 minutes away. I took a ride. They have a pool. I took a ride by the house and drove by, and the lawn wasn't cut. All right. And I looked over the fence. The pool is a little greeny. All right. So I picked up the phone and called the listing agent and said, we got to be maintaining the house. So please make sure that, by Thursday, the lawn is cut and the pool isn't green. All right. So, sometimes it's just, and part of it is this seller's been a little complicated because it's a divorce situation. And, so just preempting. All right. I took a little ride out just to make sure. And the listing agent was, I'll call them and make sure. I said, okay, we're agents. We can't make our people do things, but there are ramifications if things don't get done. So,
well, and Joe, that's a great best practice that you just contributed to this conversation. You went ahead of time. You see that there's an issue. Now you can make the phone call versus showing up, having not gone by there to see if the pool's green, the lawn's not cut. What would happen if you showed up and the lawn's not cut and the pool by that time is really, really green? Now, what are you doing at your walk?
Well, I'm working.
You're backpedaling. You're working way harder than you need to. Versus a 5-minute phone call after a 20-minute drive.
Right.
You got ahead of the curve. You saw that the situation could become a problem. You plucked it, and now it's on the seller side. You've notified them that the home wasn't maintained as per the contract, and they need to go over there and take care of it. But most importantly, what a bad last impression, because we talk about these impressions and how important they are. You did everything right, except for you didn't go check, and then during the walkthrough, now they're buying a home, and they're disappointed because they're going to be moving into a home with a green pool. They can't swim that night in their new house, and they got long grass. you know,
Right.
so
And
that's
now they have to think about, how am I cutting this? And I don't even have anything there. And if you're in an HOA, then they're probably sending nasty notes to somebody or a fine or whatever. So, so what do they say, a stitch in time? So, but now let's talk about what if there's an issue the day of closing. All right, our walkthrough sheets. There is a walkthrough sheet that says, there's some issues and it has to be signed by the buyer and seller. And then you might be writing an addendum to hold money back in escrow for those items. So no one wants to do that kind of stuff. And the title company doesn't want to do that stuff. And depending on the loan, if they hold escrow money, it might have to be sent back through underwriting to approve that. So it just is a lot of problems, so it was no big deal, 20-minute ride, back in the car, a phone call on the way home, and hopefully the lawn will be cut tomorrow when I go. So,
yes, right. But you recognized it and you let everyone know you did your job. That's the best practice that you've accomplished. We all know ahead of time what we're getting ourselves into. You can have that conversation with your buyer. So that way, when you show up, if it wasn't cut, you did your job to instruct them to get it cut. And so, and it was a conversation that's already been had.
Okay, now I'm trying to move my screen again, and it doesn't like me today. I had not had this problem, but it might be because, there it goes. After closing, this is the most important part. Well, not the most important, but it is.
Pretty darn important.
Yeah, go ahead, take some of it.
So gratitude should precede everything. Thank them. And heartily thank them. They gave you an opportunity. When you think about it, most people know probably 15 realtors, according to National Association of Realtors. On average, nationally, they know 15. I would say in the Tampa Bay market, they probably know 17, 18. And they chose you. For whatever reason, maybe if it was a reload, if it was whatever, you got the opportunity to work with them. Thank them for that opportunity. And then talk about their home warranty that they purchased, so that way they understand what they're getting themselves into. And this is one of the, in my opinion, this is gold, because God forbid something does happen as soon as they move in. There's an insurance policy in place. Someone will be out there to help them out. And they're not going to go to you and say, dude, I bought a lemon. You and me, we didn't do this right. And again, it's leaving positive last impressions. Talk to them about receiving their deed so they know.
Let me add something there. I had a client, we got him a home warranty. They bought the house down in Tampa. It was an older home, refurbished. And 3 weeks after they moved in, the air conditioner died, just died, okay? And May is not pleasant, all right? So, but the home warranty, they couldn't fix it, and they got a brand new air conditioner. Now, what if they didn't have that home warranty? They'd be having an $8,000 bill.
And blaming the seller, blaming you.
And by the way, they might blame you. You hadn't. So, even though you said maybe you should buy this, they don't listen to you. But then, then you're not the nice guy when they didn't do what you asked them to do, and now they have a problem.
So, home warranty, you're buying peace of mind. You might still go through the inconvenience of having to replace something, but there's peace of mind knowing that you just bought a home. You don't have to shell out another $8,500 for a new AC. So I like the next one. Talk to them about receiving their deed. They need to know that it's coming. They need to understand that they're going to be receiving a lot of mail at their new address. But this is one that you really want to look at and talk about. And then I always ask them to talk to the title company about homesteading, so that way the title company can a lot of times do the work for them, but they know what they have to do. The title company will instruct them on what they have to do to be homestead. And then Joe, the next one is beautiful for a pillar of business, right?
Yeah, I want to talk about the deed, because when I bought my house, I must have got 800 postcards. For $72, you can get a copy of your deed. All right. And it's a scam, because all they do is, they take your $72. They may send you a copy of what's on the internet already. All right. So So warn them, like, you're going to get the original deed from the title company along with your title policy. Do not buy anything. But, you know, Otis, we deal with people of all ages, and sometimes you have older people that, you know, they don't understand. They just think, oh, let's get the copy of it. And they don't remember the fact that we told them you're going to get a copy from the title company. And of course, I tell them when you get a copy, that's a reminder to go do when they get their copy, to go do homesteading. All right, that's their reminder. And I also send them an email about 2 weeks after closing to remind them to go and do that.
Yeah.
Ask for the referral, right? I mean, ask if they have anybody.
Absolutely.
And I hope I did an awesome job for you. I have a gift for you. And if you give me a bad review, I know where you live. I mean, I didn't say that. So, and talk about the survey that they're going to get. Talk about it. You earned it. You did a hell of a job for them over the month process, if not 2 or 3 months, depending on how long you worked with them, buying a house and giving them expert advice and making sure that they weren't harmed along the way. So tell them you're going to get a survey, and it would be really beneficial for me if you would kindly take a minute to fill it out. And
you brought up something important, Joe. A lot of times we're in the belly of the beast. You know, you've just gone through closing, you're moving, you're doing all this stuff, and you forget about the big picture. And so telling them their story, hey, this is where we started, and this is what we did, and this is part of the story, and just really bringing to them the big picture of their accomplishment and what they just done in a story format, it makes it easy for them to relate. Hey, yeah, this just happened, you know, and then, hey, yeah, and I'm going to be sending you, you know, if you could say some nice things about our story together,
right,
and your purchase of your home. And then there's another survey here that I also want to talk about. That's the survey that you purchased for the meets and boundaries of your house, the legal description. Mm-hmm. Keep that with your deed and all your house paperwork. Keep that off to the side. Save it, safe, or upload it to a drive. Whatever you got to do, but make sure that you keep that paperwork. That's pretty important paper.
Yep. They're going to need that if they want to put a fence or put in a pool or any of that, any thing to the outside of the house. They're going to need to have that survey.
If they want to refinance 3-4 years from now,
right,
you got to have the survey for the Alta 9. It's all pretty important stuff.
And one of the last things on here is the preferred client club. All right, and I just got my cards for this quarter, which I've got to put together, but it is probably one of the best things you can buy. Yeah. It's 20 some bucks for 2 years and 40 bucks for 5 years. You know, you get, it's wonderful though, you know, Otis, look, they stamp all the envelopes for you and address them. And of course, then you got a nice little blank card that you can fill out and send them. Hey, I drove by your house and I saw that your pool went in. I hope it's really good. Or, you know, so, and this one happens to be about fall and it has pretty fall colors on it. I guess there's really no fall palm trees. So, you know, it's really one of the best bargains. And you sign up for that when you do your deal sheet in the very beginning of your process, and do it. And it's really interesting because, you know, I sign it, I throw my card in it, I put a little note in it, and I'll get emails back. Hey, Joe, we're doing fine. Thanks for your note. Yeah, the pool's in. We love it. Here's a picture of it, you know, and you keep that connection with them. And you're not hounding them once a month. It's just, you know, I mean, they get other stuff from me, like magnets and stuff like that, to keep in touch. But these are your future listings.
Well, I'm so happy you brought that up, Joe, because the best practices of the top producers they've already done business with this. This is their database of clients that they've already worked with. And when you look at this, again, a National Association of Realtors statistic, 85% of home buyers said they would use that agent again or refer business to that agent, yet 15% actually do. So you're looking at a 60% gap where there wasn't follow-up and someone else came in and intercepted that deal because of the lack of follow-up. So when is the best time to automate all of your follow-up? Make sure that they're in your holiday emails. Make sure that they get their, there's plenty of stuff out there that they can receive monthly market reports. They can receive quarterly postcards, market reports, whatever the case may be. And then of course, just flat out follow-up every 90 days, 6 months, whatever. But there has to be follow-up, and there's so many tools that we can use that are automated tools. Especially like with Business Builder with Century 21, we got the Business Builder, we've got the Preferred Client Club. If you put them in all of that, even if you forgot about them, your business didn't. And your business model, your automated part of your business model didn't forget about them. And eventually they'll come back to you. And that means something because you already worked hard.
You know,
Don't just leave them and abandon them and take the money and run. Make sure that they know you still love them. You still can give them the attention they need.
One of the interesting, I bought 5, 6 houses in my lifetime. And the first 4 were, I wasn't an agent. I was just a consumer buying a house. And not one of those agents ever kept in contact with me.
Yeah, strange.
And you know what? I couldn't tell you what the heck their name was. All right. But
they know how to get a hold of them, right?
Yeah. I mean, they literally, thank you, I got my money. And you know, now maybe after they sold the house, after I bought a house from them, maybe I gave them such a commotion they decided to leave real estate. I don't know.
Well, and here's another best practice. When you get them some kind of a closing gift, make sure that your brand is on that gift. So cutting boards with your name and phone number on it. I felt that was a great best practice that you brought to the table, Joe. I had a guy that was a big investor and I wanted to continue doing business with him. And I found out that he graduated from the University of Florida. So he was a Gator. And I got him a Gator head that must have come off a 13-foot alligator. This thing was huge. It looked like a part dinosaur, right? But when the football games are being played, he pulls that huge Gator head out. He thinks of me. Man, my realtor got this for me. Cool guy. Look at this monster that he gave me. That thing will continue to be in those conversations. And then he's going to tell the story about how he got the house that he got. And so to this day, I keep up with him. And to this day, during football season, he tells me, I pull out the monster Gator head. Everyone sees it whenever it's Gator games on. You know, it's something that's there, that's unique, that he'll remember me by. I'm not saying go get all the Gators, you know, Gator heads, but what I am saying is find out what they like, you know, who maybe it's their alma mater at their college. Maybe it's something different, you know, a lifestyle thing that they have that you can make a, you know, a positive gift, nothing that's going to break the bank, of course, but it has your information. So that way they know how to get a hold of you. They know who you are.
A lot of my clients, if they're military, they're commute, you know, they're moving over long distances, so they make them throw out any food and stuff. You can't ship food. So I usually get those people, I get them a spice rack, a nice $40 spice rack with spices on it. And I tell them, I said, you know, here's something for your new kitchen and your beautiful new spice rack. And when you make dinner, think of me, you know. And I just got a listing in April or May this year, I can't remember which month, but it was a past client that I had bought a spice rack for. And he said to me, every time I cook, I thought of you, giving us this really nice gift. And you know what? It cost me $40, you know, but guess what? I got a listing. So, you know, you have to pay forward a little bit. You know, you do have to invest.
What a great last impression.
Yep.
Right? Every time he cooked, what a great last impression. Every time he cooked, he thought of the guy that helped him buy the house.
Right.
Great last impression.
Yeah. All right. Guess what? Our time is up.
Yeah. And there's no chats. There's no questions. So this is the last class for NLU. I hope everyone really enjoyed the information that we were able to give you. best practices that we've collected over time. And then, of course, you know, at the beginning, we got to take a chance to look at the markets, how it's changing, how we're adapting our roadmap and our strategies to it. And so we really hope you enjoyed this NLU, and we'll continue to evolve as we move forward.
Oh, we got a chat. Someone said something. That was probably Mike telling us. Oh, you're welcome. Welcome, Jeff. And Otis, how's it feel to have a class that separates you from happy hour? I don't.
Makes me long for happy hour.
Yeah, happy hour, happy hour. So, all right, let's get off here. And thank you, Otis. It was great.
Take care, guys. Thank you, Joe. Talk to you later.
Bye.